Good morning, Lamai. Hope you are doing well. Now we are moving to a new unit. That's unit number 9, microbiology. I have already sent the note to our WhatsApp group and I asked you to read the note and copy the note to a separate notebook. I think you have done it well. If you have copied the note to a separate notebook, it will be helpful to memorize this stuff. And also, when we are discussing, keep the note with you because in some slides, we are reading the note as well while we are discussing. Okay, in this video lesson, we are discussing the first part of microbiology, that is nature and types of microorganisms. Turn to page number 1 of resource book or your note. We are moving to the first part of the lesson, that is nature of microorganisms. First, we will discuss what microbiology is. So it is the study of organisms that are too small and are not visible clearly to the naked eye or unaided eye when they exist individually. So if someone asks what are microorganisms, then we can say microorganisms are organisms that are too small and are not visible clearly to the naked eye or unaided eye when they exist individually. So look at this carefully. You have to definitely use those few words when they exist individually. So in your note also, underline those words in the definition. So what is the importance of that? Then here if you consider a colony of bacteria or colony of fungi, those colonies can be clearly observed through the naked eye. But when bacteria and fungi live as individual organisms, we can't clearly observe that. That's important. Therefore, definitely underline those words in the note. We said earlier, microorganisms are too small and can't observe through the naked eye. Therefore, definitely their size should be less than 0.1 millimeters in size, because you know that the resolution power of human eye is 0.1 millimeters. So which organisms belong to these microorganisms? There are several groups like bacteria, archaeobacteria, cyanobacteria, which are also known as blue-green bacteria, fungi, protists, molecules like mycoplasma and phytoplasma, viruses, viroids, and prions. Since these microorganisms are very small, micrometer, nanometer are the units which are used to measure microorganisms and their structural components. Go to the section ubiquitous nature of microorganisms in your note. So what's the meaning of this ubiquitous word? That means they are found in every environment or every habitat in the world. So therefore simply we can say microorganisms are everywhere. They are found in water, soil, air, and interior and exterior surfaces of other organisms. Now get your note and read with me. So under the topic ubiquitous nature of microorganisms, it says like this. This stuff can be easily understood. Therefore, we will just read the section under ubiquitous nature of microorganisms. Read with me. Microorganisms are ubiquitous on Earth. They are found in water, soil, and air, interior and exterior surfaces of other organisms. Marine and freshwater microorganisms form the basis of food chain in oceans and freshwaters. Some of them do photosynthesis and are primary producers in aquatic environments. Here you know, for an example, if you consider microscopic algae belong to protists, they are photosynthetic and act as main primary producers in ocean and freshwater. Okay, then go to the next slide. Soil microorganisms help recycling of chemical elements between soil, water, and living organisms. So what are these? For an example, if you consider decomposers in soil involved in recycling of nutrient elements. Okay, then it says microorganisms suspended in air as bioaerosols have the opportunity to travel long distances with the wind current and precipitate. Pathogenic bioaerosols cause opportunities for disease spreading. But remember here it says only a minority of microorganisms that are associated with other organisms such as plants and animals and human are pathogenic. Majority of them are advantageous or harmless. So underline those two sentences in your note. Sometimes such sentences can be asked in MCQs as well. So therefore underline these two sentences again. Only a minority of microorganisms that associate with other organisms such as plants, animals and human are pathogenic. Majority of them are advantageous or harmless. And also this is also important. He says, however, all viruses are harmful to the organisms that they attach to. Under the ubiquitous nature of microorganisms, then we can discuss about extremophiles. So what are these extremophiles actually? You know that philes means or philic means like. So therefore we can simply say microorganisms that are capable of inhabiting extreme environmental conditions are extremophiles. So then if you consider these extreme environmental conditions which are unfavorable or even lethal for other organisms. So, but some microorganisms live in this type of extreme environmental conditions. These are found in inside earth crust, deep sea at high temperature, extreme acidic or basic conditions, hydrothermal vents, frozen seawater, and also in anaerobic conditions. If you consider these extreme environmental conditions, you can clearly observe, you can clearly identify these are not suitable for normal organisms, but some microorganisms live there. These extremophiles can be classified according to the conditions in which they grow. Here in the slide you can observe there's a table which indicates different groups of extremophiles and their extreme environmental conditions. If you consider the first one, first group is thermophiles. They live in high temperatures. Second one, psychrophiles, live in very low temperatures. Likewise, the microorganisms that live in acidic pH values or acidic conditions can be termed as acidophiles. That live in basic conditions or very basic pH values can be termed as alkaliphiles. That require sodium chloride or live in high saline conditions, in other words, can be termed as halophiles. Likewise, microorganisms that live in very high pressures can be termed as barophiles. They live normally inside deep sea at high pressure. But remember here, some of these extreme environments consist of more than one extreme condition. An example, many hot springs are acidic or alkaline in nature at the same time. Again, likewise, deep seas are cold and remain in high pressure. Deep seas are cold and remain in high pressure. That means microorganisms live in such environments are adapted to live with more than one extreme conditions. In other words, we can say, so if you consider deep sea, it has high pressures and also very cold conditions. Therefore, the microorganisms that live in deep seas should be barophiles as well as psychrophiles. There are reasons for the ubiquitous nature of microorganisms. What are those? Normally, microorganisms have high growth and reproduction rate. That's the first reason. Secondly, they have high surface area to volume ratio due to their small sizes, which results in high metabolic rate. And also they show diverse morphological shapes and have diversity in nutritional types. And also they show physiological diversity, and some are capable of fixing atmospheric molecular nitrogen. These are the reasons for the ubiquitous nature. We can discuss these one by one in next slides or later. We said that microorganisms have high growth rate. So these are discussed, this thing is discussed in page 2 of your resource book. So due to their high growth rate, you can say their average generation time is very less. So what is this generation time? Normally it refers to the time required to double the population size of microorganisms. So how this happens? So we said earlier, microorganisms are very small. Due to their smaller size, their surface area to volume ratio is very high. Here, what is the surface area? Surface area means the area of their body that exposed to outer environment. Compared to their internal volume, they have higher surface area. Therefore, we can say they have high surface area to volume ratio due to their smaller size. Since large surface area is exposed to outer environment, they are available for exchange of materials with external environment very easily. In other words, they have large surface area available for exchange of materials with external environment. Due to that, easily materials can move into the cell, and also waste products can be easily released out. That means due to high surface area to volume ratio, flow rate of materials into cells and exit of waste materials outside the cells increases, which result in producing a high metabolic rate. Due to high metabolic rate, they have high growth rate and also high reproduction rate. High reproduction rate means the generation time is less. Remember that if organisms have high reproduction rate, generation time is less. That means they require very less time to double the size of their populations. On page number 2 of your resource book, there's a heading stating that morphological, nutritional and physiological diversity of microorganisms. Read the things under that topic. And on page number 3, there's another topic, all types of microorganisms. So here actually the morphological, nutritional and physiological diversity of microorganisms are discussed under types of microorganisms. Therefore, combinedly, we will discuss morphological, nutritional and physiological diversity of microorganisms under different types of microorganisms. Okay, then we will move to the first group of microorganisms, bacteria. Under that, we can first discuss about the morphological diversity of bacteria. You know that bacteria are unicellular prokaryotes. They show different morphological forms and arrangements. The most obvious structural feature of bacteria is the shape of individual cells. Remember that and underline that in your note. You know that there are 3 basic shapes of bacteria. Spherical shaped bacteria known as coccus. Bacillus means rod shaped. Spirillum means spiral shaped. These are the shapes of individual bacterial cells. You know that bacteria can divide by simple division or binary fission. If the daughter cell resulted by division detached from each other, then they live as individual cells. But if the daughter cells resulted from division remain attached to each other, then they form different cell arrangements or colonies. First, we will discuss about different forms of cell arrangement of coccus bacteria, that means spherical bacteria. We said earlier, if daughter cells resulted by division detached from each other, they remain as single individuals. It is applicable to spherical shape of coccus bacteria as well. If coccus cells divide and detach from each other, they can be simply termed as coccus. But if they arrange together, they form different colonies or different cell arrangements. Here you can observe there are different names given for these colonies or cell arrangements. Those are diplococci, streptococci, tetrad, sarcinae and staphylococci. First, go to the first cell arrangement, diplococci. So here you can observe when forming diplococci arrangement, cells divide in one plane. You can clearly observe that in the diagram. Then divided cells remain in pairs and form diplococci. So here there's a table describing these things in your resource book as well on page number 3. Go to that table. Here actually in this table, plural birds are mentioned as singular birds. For an example here, the correct word should be diplococci, but in the research book it is stated as diplococcus. So please correct them in the table. They should be diplococci, streptococci, tetrad, sarcinae and staphylococci. Okay, again go to the diplococci nature. Cells divide in one plane and divided cells remain in pairs and form diplococci. Then go to the next arrangement, streptococci. Here in streptococci also cells divide in one plane. Then divided cells remain attached in chain-like pattern. Then it is known as streptococci. When forming the tetrad cell arrangement, you can observe in the diagram, cells divide in 2 planes and producing 4 cells remain attached together. Then when producing sarcinin, you can observe here sarcinin is somewhat like a cube. Then cells divide in 3 planes. And those resulted cells remain attached in groups of 8 cells and form cube-like structure called sarcinin. The last one is staphylococci. When forming staphylococci, cells divide in multiple planes and form grape-like clusters of cells. We will go to different forms of cell arrangement of Bacillus bacteria. We said earlier, Coccus bacteria can divide in many planes and form different cell arrangements. But remember here, Bacillus bacteria divide only across the short axis. Therefore, only 3 types of cell arrangements can be observed in Bacillus bacteria. They are Bacillus, that means single Bacillus, Diplobacilli, and Streptobacilli. If the cells resulted by cell division detach from each other, then it forms single bacillus or a single rod. If the daughter cell resulted by division is attached together, then it forms diplobacilli. Then they remain as pairs after cell division. If the daughter cells resulted arranged as a chain, then it forms streptobacilli. Here also there is a basic mistake in your resource book. These words Diplobacillus and Streptobacillus should be converted to plural words. That means they should be correctly written as Diplobacilli and Streptobacilli. Okay, then we will move to different forms of cell arrangement of spiral bacteria. There are basically 3 cell arrangements of spiral bacteria. They are Vibrio, Spirillum, and Spirochete. Here, remember this, spiral bacteria have 1 or more twists. They are never straight. So if you consider this Vibrio form, so it's look like a curved rod or comma shape. Spirillum is a helical shaped bacteria, like a corkscrew and rigid body. It has a rigid body. If you consider Spirochete, it's helical shape with a flexible body. Okay, basically you have to memorize these shapes and how they are formed. Even these simple things can be asked in the exam. For an example, in 2003 or 4 paper in a structured essay, once they have asked to name and draw the basic shapes of cells, individual cells, and cell arrangements of bacteria. Such a question can be easily asked again. Now we are moving to nutritional diversity of bacteria. You know, based on the source of energy and source of carbon, there are 4 modes of nutrition. Those sources of energy may be light energy or chemical energy. Sources of carbon may be inorganic carbon in carbon dioxide or organic carbon. Based on that, there are 4 modes of nutrition among organisms. Those are photoautotrophs, photoheterotrophs, chemoautotrophs, and chemoheterotrophs. All these 4 modes of nutrition based on the carbon source and energy source can be seen in bacteria. Here you can observe there is a table summarizing the nutritional mode, their sources of energy and carbon, and respective examples for each nutritional type. We'll go through this table. First one is photoautotrophs. Then source of energy should be light energy. Then source of carbon is carbon dioxide, an inorganic source of carbon. Example, bacterium or bacteria with photoautotrophic mode of nutrition are purple sulfur bacteria and green sulfur bacteria. Okay, second mode is photoheterotrophs. Then again, energy source is light and source of carbon is organic carbon. You know, basically heterotrophs use organic carbon. Then example, bacterium with photoheterotrophic mode of nutrition is purple non-sulfur bacteria. In addition to this, we can state another example, that is green non-sulfur bacteria. So it is not given in your resource book, but it is correct. So put green non-sulfur bacteria under photoheterotrophic nutrition. This is also another example. Okay, third mode of nutrition is chemoautotrophs. Chemo means the energy source should be chemical energy. Specifically remember here and highlight this. They use inorganic chemicals. That means their chemical source, their energy source is chemical energy in inorganic chemicals, not simply organic chemicals. Okay. Then carbon source should be carbon dioxide because they are autotrophs. So what are the examples with chemoautotrophic mode of nutrition? Those are Nitrobacter, Nitrosomonas, and Thiobacillus thioxidans. So here, carefully remember the spellings of these scientific names. And also when you are writing these scientific names in exam, you should definitely underline this. Even though spelling is correct, and if you do not underline the scientific name or even a generic name, marks are not given. Therefore, definitely they should be correctly spelled and they should be underlined. So remember these scientific names. In microbiology, all the scientific names given should be memorized. Okay, then go to the fourth mode of nutritional type, that is chemoheterotroph. In chemoheterotrophs, as name implies, source of energy should be chemical energy. It's specifically the organic chemicals. They use organic chemicals. Source of carbon is organic carbon, somewhat like us. So then most bacteria are chemoheterotrophs. Then about physiological diversity of bacteria. Bacteria or microorganisms can be classified into 4 physiological groups on the basis of their tolerance to oxygen or on the basis of utilization of oxygen. Here basically you know, on the basis of utilization of oxygen, there are 2 respiratory modes or 2 physiological groups basically. Those are aerobic and anaerobic. You know that aerobes needs oxygen, molecular oxygen for their survival. As name implies, aerobes can survive in the absence of oxygen. Further, these aerobic organisms can be categorized. Remember here, the aerobic organisms can be categorized into 2 subgroups. Those are obligate aerobic and facultative anaerobic. Likewise, anaerobic organisms can also categorize into 2. Those are obligate anaerobic and microaerophilic. Okay, here all these 4 physiological groups or respiratory types can be seen in bacteria. There are different examples. Those descriptions and examples are given in the table. This table is given on page number 6 and 7 of your resource book or in the note. Go through that table. Then we can discuss the physiological group or respiratory types one by one. First, we'll move to obligate aerobic. What's the meaning of obligate? It means definitely. Obligate aerobic means, as given in this description, these bacteria require oxygen for their survival. In other words, they can't live under anaerobic conditions. They survive only in the presence of oxygen. They generate energy by oxidative phosphorylation. Example, Acetobacter. Acetobacter, remember the spellings correctly, ACE, Acetobacter species. It means species. Okay. Then the second category is obligate aerobes or obligate anaerobic. Anaerobic means, again, obligate means definitely. Anaerobic means the absence of oxygen. Here you can observe in the description, they cannot survive in the presence of oxygen. That means they live only under anaerobic conditions. These microorganisms generate energy by fermentation. You know fermentation is a type of anaerobic respiration. Example given is Clostridium. So later when we are discussing microorganisms and diseases, we'll find an organism called Clostridium tetani. Clostridium tetani, which is the bacterium that causes tetanus. So it lives under anaerobic conditions. I think you have heard that Clostridium tetani live under soil and also live inside iron crust. Those conditions create anaerobic conditions or anaerobic environment. In such conditions, Clostridium tetani can easily live. Remember that. We can come across that when we are discussing microorganisms and diseases. Okay, remember here Clostridium is an obligate anaerobe. Third type is facultative anaerobic. We earlier said that facultative anaerobic is a kind of aerobic respiratory mode. Here you can observe in the description it says these microorganisms prefer to grow in the presence of oxygen, producing energy by oxidative phosphorylation. But they can also grow in anaerobic environments using fermentation. In other words, these like aerobic conditions very much. When there is enough of oxygen, they aerobically respire and show faster growth rate. Remember here, they prefer to grow in the presence of oxygen and show fast growth rate under aerobic conditions. But in the absence of oxygen, they can survive. Then that means, in other words, in the absence of oxygen or under anaerobic conditions, they can shift to anaerobic respiration as a method of survival. Or in other words, these are the aerobes, but in the absence of oxygen, as an alternative method of survival, they shift to anaerobic condition. Remember here again, you can write it within the table in your resource book or in the note. Remember here, they show fast growth rate under aerobic conditions, and as an alternative method of survival, they shift to anaerobic respiration in the absence of oxygen. The example given here is Escherichia coli. Commonly, it is also known as E. coli. It's a common inhabitant in gut of human and some other animals. We can come across this in future lessons. Okay, here in this table, only bacteria are mentioned, but actually, well-known yeast. The generic name is Saccharomyces. Saccharomyces, also a facultative anaerobic organism. You can write that within the table under facultative anaerobic yeast, Saccharomyces. We'll come across that again. And also here, other than Acetobacter and obligate aerobic, there is a free-living nitrogen-fixing bacterium called Azotobacter. A-Z-O-T-O. A-Z-O-T-O-B-A-C-T-E-R. Acetobacter. It's a free-living nitrogen-fixing bacterium. It's also obligate aerobe. Remember that. Okay, then we will move to the fourth respiratory mode of physiological group, microaerophilic. Look at this word simply. What's the meaning of micro simply? Micro in Sinhala, poddak කියලා. Aero means oxygen. Philic means like. ඒ කියන්නේ පොඩ්ඩක් oxygen වලට කැමති. That's the meaning of microaerophilic. It is given here in the description. Look at this. This, and also we earlier said microaerophilic can be considered as another kind of anaerobic mode. Okay, then here look at this. These microorganisms can grow only in oxygen concentrations lower than those in air. That means they prefer low oxygen concentration. That's why we said they like oxygen little bit. Product oxygen වලට කැමති microaerophilic. Okay, the example given under microaerophilic bacteria is Lactobacillus species. Remember these descriptions or the definitions and their respective examples under each physiological group. Under physiological diversity of bacteria, we can also discuss about nitrogen fixing ability. That means atmospheric nitrogen fixing ability of bacteria and the methods of reproduction. You know that some bacteria are able to fix atmospheric dinitrogen. That means atmospheric molecular nitrogen. When you are writing about nitrogen fixation, don't just write it as nitrogen fixation. You have to write it as atmospheric fixing of atmospheric dinitrogen or atmospheric molecular nitrogen. Using the word atmospheric is a must. In past papers also, without the word atmospheric, marks are not given in the marking scheme. So therefore, carefully remember that. Okay. Then there is a diversity or variation in nitrogen fixing ability of bacteria as well. There are two groups basically. Some of bacteria are free-living nitrogen fixing bacteria. Example, Azotobacter. Azotobacter, AZO. Previously we said Azotobacter, it's an obligate aerobe. We mention it under obligate aerobes. Remember here. The other group is symbiotic nitrogen fixing bacteria. You know this rhizobium from your young ages. Rhizobium live inside legume roots and fix atmospheric dinitrogen. You know that during nitrogen fixation, during a fixation of atmospheric dinitrogen, N2 gas in atmosphere is converted into ammonia or ammonium ions. We discussed same things under diversity as well. Both Azotobacter and Rhizobium can do that conversion. Okay. Then about reproduction of bacteria. You know this stuff. Mostly bacteria undergo asexual reproduction by binary fission. It's a kind of simple division. Sometimes they also do fragmentation or budding as asexual reproduction methods. In rare occasions, bacteria of two strains share a portion of genetic material through the process of conjugation. You know this. Conjugation is the exchange of genetic material between two individual organisms, two bacteria species simply. This can be seen in Paramecium as well. And here, the conjugation is believed as the type of sexual reproduction method of bacteria. We are moving to the second group of microorganisms, cyanobacteria. The name or the term cyan means blue-green. Therefore, cyanobacteria are also known as blue-green bacteria. This blue-green color is due to their pigmentation. You know that their photosensitive pigments are chlorophyll A and phycocyanin. Those two pigments involved in producing blue-green color. Here under cyanobacteria also, we will discuss the morphological diversity, nutritional mode, and physiological diversity. First, we will move to morphological diversity of cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria exhibit a great variety of shapes and cell arrangements. Basically, there are two forms or two cell arrangements. Those are unicellular form and colonial form. You know, most of them are unicellular. Here, look at the unicellular form. In unicellular form, cells separate after cell division. Majority of unicellular forms stay together by a copious secretion of mucilage. Copious means abundant. Mucilage means mucus. So that means even though they are individual cells, they are found together within a common mucilage or mucus. Okay, under diversity also we discuss about such unicellular cyanobacteria. So go to the note of diversity and refer that. Okay, second group or second cell arrangement is colonial forms. That means simply the colony forming cyanobacteria. In colonies, cells remain attached by cell walls of individual cells, or else these cells held in a common gelatinous matrix. Then it forms a colony. These colonies are of two types actually. Those are non-filamentous colonies and filamentous colonies. First, we will move to non-filamentous colonies. They have different shapes or different arrangements like spherical, cubical, square, or irregular shape. This is based on the plane of division and the direction. Okay, then if you consider filamentous colonies, those are resulted of cell division in a single plane and a single direction. So then it forms a chain or thread-like structure. Okay, as you observe in these diagrams, there are 4 examples given in this slide under filamentous colonies: Anabina, Nostoc, Lyngbia, and Oscillatoria. You can observe they have a chain or thread-like structure. What is the mode of nutrition of cyanobacteria? You simply know that all cyanobacteria are photoautotrophs. They carry out oxygenic photosynthesis like plants and most of algae. Okay, then we will move to physiological diversity of cyanobacteria. As in bacteria, here also we can discuss about nitrogen fixing ability of cyanobacteria and also their reproductive methods. Here, first we will move to nitrogen fixing ability of cyanobacteria. Many cyanobacteria are able to fix atmospheric dinitrogen, not all, many. They show diversity in nitrogen fixation. As in bacteria, here also there are two groups of cyanobacteria which involve in nitrogen fixation. Those are free living nitrogen fixing cyanobacteria and symbiotic nitrogen fixing cyanobacteria. Nostoc, Lyngbia are the examples of free living nitrogen fixing cyanobacteria. There are common symbiotic associations. First one is Anabaena that lives inside leaves of Azolla plant. Azolla is a water fern. The second example is Anabaena live inside coralloid roots of Cycas. In previous slides, when we were discussing bacteria, we said that during atmospheric nitrogen fixation, N2 gas in atmosphere is converted to ammonia or ammonium ions. Same thing is done by these cyanobacteria as well. In bacteria, what is the structure used in nitrogen fixation? They have nitrogen fixative membranes as convolutions of their cell membrane. But cyanobacteria, cyanobacteria possess a specialized structure or specialized cell called heterocyst in fixation of nitrogen. Then this nitrogen fixation is catalyzed by an enzyme called nitrogenase, which is found inside heterocyst. But here remember this, nitrogenase enzyme is sensitive to oxygen. That means, in other words, simply inside the heterocyst, nitrogen fixation happens under anaerobic conditions because enzyme is sensitive to oxygen. Therefore, heterocyst has a thick wall to protect enzyme from oxygen that could diffuse from neighboring photosynthetic cells and from air or water. Remember here again, anaerobic conditions are maintained, anaerobic condition is maintained inside the heterocyst to facilitate atmospheric dinitrogen fixation. Under physiology of cyanobacteria, we can discuss about echinids as well. You know about echinids very well because we have discussed that under diversity. So what's an echinid? It's a thick wall resting spore with stored food produced by cyanobacteria, which are resistant to drought and high temperatures. That means these drought and high temperatures are somewhat extreme environmental conditions. In such extreme environmental conditions, echinid can survive. But other growth cells of the colony will be destroyed, remaining only the echinid. When favorable time periods appear, echinid germinate and form the organism again. It's a kind of resting or kind of survival. Okay, if you move to reproduction of cyanobacteria, you know that they reproduce only by asexual methods. There is no sexual reproduction in cyanobacteria. So single, unicellular and colonial non-filamentous types undergo simple cell division. Colonial filamentous and colonial unicellular forms reproduce by fragmentation. Third group of microorganisms is fungi. Actually, we discuss fungi in detail under diversity. So please go through the note of fungi under diversity and study it thoroughly. Actually, we discuss life cycle as well. Anyhow, here we will discuss briefly about fungi. You know that fungi are eukaryotes. They are either unicellular or multicellular. The more common example of unicellular fungus is yeast. Its generic name is known as Saccharomyces. Multicellular fungi can also term as molds. You know that the vegetative body of multicellular fungi consist of filamentous, long thread-like structures called hyphae. These hyphae are branched. The collection of hyphae is called mycelium. Here you can observe in the slide, it says molds form visible masses called mycelia, which are collection of hyphae. In some fungi, hyphae are septate. So what are these septa? Septa are cross walls that separate hyphae into cell-like units. Then the single cell may be unicellular or multicellular. Hyphae without septa are known as xenocytic. If you recall, phylum Zygomycota, phylum Theridiomycota have xenocytic mycelia. Okay, that's about the morphological variation. If we move to mode of nutrition of fungi, you know that all fungi are chemoheterotrophs. Specifically, they are absorptive heterotrophs. So what is the meaning of these absorptive heterotrophs? That means they secrete extracellular enzymes and digest organic matter outside the body. Then, after digestion, soluble digested end products are absorbed into their body through their chitinous cell wall. That's called absorptive mode of nutrition. Okay, but fungi possess different modes of nutrition, different modes of chemoheterotrophic nutrition activity. Those are first one, saprophytic mode of nutrition. Example, decomposers and involved in recycling of elements. Second type, mutualism. You know about lichens and mycorrhizae. Then mycorrhizae are formed by filamentous fungi attached to roots of higher plants. You know that very well. The third one is parasitism. Parasitic fungi are pathogenic on plants and animals. So here again remember one thing here. Irrespective of the different modes of nutrition, we said earlier in diversity, all fungi are absorptive heterotrophs. Okay, we are moving to reproduction of fungi. Actually, these things are discussed on page number 8 of your resource book. So please go through that content as well. Read it thoroughly. Okay. If you consider reproduction of fungi, unicellular forms asexually reproduce by fission or budding. One common example of unicellular fungus that involving budding is yeast. In the previous slide, you observed a diagram of yeast. It's actually the budding stage of yeast. Then filamentous fungi or molds undergo sexual reproduction as well as asexual reproduction. In sexual reproduction, they produce spores. In asexual reproduction, they can produce asexual spores or their mycelia can be fragmented. We discuss life cycles and diversity. Again, go through those life cycles and look at the reproduction methods. Here you can observe two diagrams. These are mentioned in your resource book as well. The diagram A represents the reproduction method of penicillium, spore formation. You know that penicillium is belong to phylum Ascomycota. So therefore, what are these asexual spores then? These are conidia. So you know that Ascomycotes asexually reproduce by formation of conidia. You can observe these conidia are the asexual spores that are produced in chains or as clusters. The right hand side diagram, diagram B, represent reproduction method of yeast. As we said, it is budding of yeast. The fourth group of microorganisms is unicellular protists. So here under microbiology, we discuss only about unicellular protists. But you know, protists are either unicellular or multicellular. Those multicellular protists can't be considered as microorganisms. Therefore, we discuss only about unicellular protists. Under diversity, we stated some common examples of unicellular protists. Those are amoeba, paramecium, euglena, as you observe in this slide. Other than that, you know about diatoms. Diatoms are also unicellular microbial protists. Okay, we do not discuss about diatoms here, but simply go through these morphological variations and mode of nutrition of unicellular protists. Here, these unicellular protists are pleomorphic. So, what's the meaning of pleomorphic? It means they are vary in shape and size, and they possess locomotive structures like pseudopodia. For an example, amoeba possess pseudopodia. Then paramecium has cilia for locomotion, and euglena possess one or two flagella. They exist either individually or form colonies. Some join together and form colonies. You know that. And if you consider mode of nutrition of unicellular protists, they are either photoautotrophic, example euglena, and also diatoms, and also they are heterotrophic. Amoeba and paramecium are heterotrophic and mixotrophic. What is mixotrophic mode of nutrition? You know it's a combination of both photoautotrophic and heterotrophic nutrition. some euglenoids. That means some euglena species are mixotrophic. And also some algae are symbiotic. Specifically, here if you consider lichens, they are mutualistic. You know that lichens are basically of two types. Some lichens are formed by green algae with filamentous fungi, but some are formed by cyanobacteria with filamentous fungi. These protists show three modes of respiration or physiological methods. Some of them are aerobic, some are anaerobic, and also some are facultative anaerobic. If you consider the reproduction of unicellular protists, they reproduce sexually by gametes or asexually by fission. You know that paramecium, amoeba, they involve in binary fission. These things are discussed on page number 9 of your resource book or note. Read those contents as well. So here you can easily pause the video and go to the note. Then you can read it easily to understand it well. Return to page number 10 of your resource book. There we can discuss about molecules. So this is a new thing. We haven't discussed this under diversity. So actually what are these molecules? They are actually prokaryotes, belong to domain bacteria. Here we discuss two types of prokaryotes, two types of molecules actually. Those are mycoplasma and phytoplasma. You know, normally bacteria and archaebacteria possess cell walls. Bacteria possess cell wall which is made up of peptidoglycan. Archaeobacteria possess cell wall which is made up of proteins and polysaccharides. But unique thing of molecules is they do not possess cell walls. Therefore, remember that underline that statement unique due to absence of cell walls in your note. It is important. Okay, here you can observe in this slide the outermost covering of their body is membrane or cell membrane. There is no cell wall. You can observe it clearly in this diagram. Okay, here molecules are also pleomorphic. That means they vary in shape from spherical to filamentous. Some are spherical and some are filamentous. These are smallest prokaryotic group of organisms. Therefore, can't observe under light microscope. These can be observed only under electron microscope. කොහොක ගහන අවුරුද්දෙන් පස්සෙත් ගණන් ගන්න එපා. මේ වෙසක් එකටලා තුන් තාම ගිහිල්ලා නැහැ. පාඩමට focus කරන්න. Okay. Here if you consider their locomotive methods, they lack locomotive methods like flagella. Here you can observe it clearly in the cell. Okay, then almost all mycoplasma are parasites of human and animals. Almost all, not all of them. They require high amount of organic growth factors. Then they reproduce by binary fission and do not produce spores. They are either aerobic or facultative anaerobic. In the previous slide, we discussed about mycoplasma. Now we will move to second group of molecules called phytoplasma. Here there are similarities and also differences between phytoplasma and mycoplasma. So here if you consider the first feature, it talks about the morphology. It's similar to mycoplasma in many ways, similar in size and can be seen only under electron microscope. These are also pleomorphic. That means they vary in shape from spherical to filamentous. These are similarities. So focus them. If the question asks to write similarities between phytoplasma and mycoplasma, you can write these. But here you can observe phytoplasma only infect plants and are generally present in the phloem sap. They cannot grow in artificial culture media. They are transmitted mostly by leafhoppers. Therefore, they reproduce in both leafhoppers as well as in the plant body. If you look at the diagram which represents the life cycle here, no need to memorize the life cycle of phytoplasma, but just look at this diagram. Here you can observe. We said phytoplasma live inside phloem sap. Here you can observe in this diagram when leafhopper feed on phloem sap of a plant, of an infected plant or diseased plant, the phytoplasma in the phloem sap move into the digestive tract of leafhopper. Then leaf hopper is also infected. Then inside the leaf hopper, this phytoplasma undergo multiplication or reproduce. Then the infectious leaf hopper feed on a healthy plant. Then this phytoplasma in its digestive tract move into the phloem sac. Then the plant will be infected. Remember that. Here if you consider reproduction, they do budding or binary fission as asexual reproduction methods. They are aerobic or facultative anaerobic. So here when you are studying, focus on similarities and also try to identify differences between phytoplasma and mycoplasma. The sixth group of microorganisms is virus. You know that viruses are not considered as living organisms when they are in outer natural environment because they do not have any cellular organization. That's the first reason. They are neither prokaryotes nor eukaryotes. And also, they do not possess any metabolic activities or reproduction when they are not living in a host cell. That means when they can't produce their own metabolism when they found alone. But inside host cells, they multiply and cause infection through various metabolic pathways. So inside the living host cell, they show some of living activities. Since viruses can only multiply within living host cell, they are considered as obligate internal parasites. They can be observed only through electron microscope. They do not possess any protein synthesis machinery, such as additional RNAs or enzymes for protein synthesis. Remember that and highlight that on your note. Therefore, they depend on host cell's protein synthesis machinery. Also, they depend on ATP synthesis process of the host cell. We said in diversity also, when they multiply inside the host cell, they use ribosomes of the host cell. They synthesize their proteins using amino acids and ATP of the host cell. In replication of their DNA or RNA, they use nucleotides of the host cell and also the enzymes of the host cell. Remember those. Therefore, they depend on a cell's protein synthesis machinery. We said that. But some viruses have some enzymes. You know, polymerases are found related to their capsids. In addition to that, RNA containing viruses consist of reverse transcriptase enzyme for reverse transcribing RNA into DNA. You know that transcription means synthesizing RNA from DNA. So in reverse, we can say synthesizing DNA from RNA can be termed as reverse transcription. The enzyme which catalyzes this reverse transcription can be easily termed as reverse transcriptase. A group of RNA containing virus called retrovirus possess this reverse transcriptase enzyme. Example, HIV that cause AIDS. Viral body usually consists of two parts. Those are, first one is central core of nucleic acid. The nucleic acid may be either DNA or RNA. Viruses do not possess both DNA and RNA. They have either DNA or RNA. These may be single-stranded or double-stranded. The second part is their outer protein coat called capsid. The unit protein of the capsid is known as capsomeres. The capsid of a virus consists of fixed number of capsomeres. And also this capsid give them a characteristic symmetry. Here you can observe the diagram in this slide. Look at the left-hand side diagram. You can observe here RNA is the nucleic acid, which is surrounded by a protein capsid. Okay, then we said capsid gives them a characteristic symmetry. Based on that, there is a morphological variation in viruses. Okay, on the basis of capsid architecture, we can identify two basic morphological symmetries. Those are helical and icosahedral. Another name for icosahedron is polyhedral. I think you know about octahedral shape, tetrahedral shape in chemistry. So if you consider tetrahedral, that means you know it has 4 sides. Octahedral means it has 8 sides. Likewise here, You can observe in this diagram, these viruses, some of these viruses are polyhedral, that means they have many sites. Based on the above symmetries, viruses show 4 types of morphological forms. Those are first one, helical virus. These possess long, rigid or flexible rods. That means here you can observe in your left hand side diagram, capsomeres are arranged in a helical manner. Example, rabies virus. Remember here, you have to memorize these examples under each morphological form. Second type is icosahedron or polyhedral. They have icosahedron symmetry with many sites. Example, adenovirus. The third one is complex viruses. These exhibit more than one form of symmetry with additional structures. Example, bacteriophage or bacteria-infecting viruses. You can observe bacteriophage in this diagram. That's the fourth diagram from your left hand side. You can observe there in a bacteriophage, head has an icosahedron shape, and also they have tail with helical shape. To the tip of the tail fibers are attached. That's why it is said it consists of more than one form of symmetry with additional structures. Okay, third form is envelope viruses. Normally we said usually viruses consist of inner nucleic acid or an outer protein capsid. But here in envelope viruses, capsid is surrounded by lipid envelope, which is mainly made up of polyphospholipids, and also there may be glycoproteins. Okay, then here this envelope virus is roughly spherical. This capsid is covered by envelopes, lipid envelopes. Example, herpes simplex virus. You can observe in this diagram. Here you can observe there the capsid is surrounded by membranous envelope, and glycoprotein spikes are attached to this envelope, not to the capsid. The well-known coronavirus or SARS coronavirus 2 or new coronavirus that we that you know that is familiar in these days, it's also an envelope virus. They use these glycoprotein structures to attach to the cell membrane or to the cell wall of the host. Now we will discuss multiplication of viruses. Go to page number 11 of your resource book and read first 2 paragraphs under multiplication of viruses. Here it says, a single virus can give rise to thousands of similar viruses in a single host cell. Therefore, viruses cause serious damages to their host, leading to severe diseases in plants, animals, and bacteria. Bacteriophages are typical group of viruses that are capable of infecting bacteria. They multiply by 2 distinct mechanisms, the lytic life cycle and lysogenic cycle. Here we mainly focus on lytic life cycle. Lytic cycle involves with the lysis of host cell. That's why it is known as lytic. Whereas the lysogenic cycle allows viral DNA incorporating into host DNA and multiply without causing lysis of the host cell. First, we will move to lytic life cycle of a bacteriophage. It's a typical life cycle. Most plant infecting viruses and animal infecting viruses also show similar life cycle. Okay, then the lytic life cycle of a bacteriophage consists of 5 main steps. The first step is attachment. Here what simply happens, you can observe in this diagram. During the attachment stage, bacteriophage attach to matching receptor site on the bacterial cell. So on their cell wall there are receptor sites. Virus or the bacteriophage attach to those receptor sites using its tail fibers. If you consider coronavirus also, we said coronavirus possesses glycoproteins. Using those glycoprotein structures, they attach to receptor sites of cell membrane of human and also in other animals. Okay, that is attachment. Then after attachment, they move to the second stage, that is penetration. As name implies, penetration means here the bacteriophage injects its DNA into the bacterial cell. This is facilitated by an enzyme which breaks down bacterial cell wall. So here, not only DNA, if a bacteriophage has RNA, it can be also injected through the cell wall into the cell. Together with this nucleic acid, some enzymes are also injected into the host cell. But remember here, as you observe in the diagram, capsid is not injected, or capsid doesn't enter the host cell. Therefore, simply we can say bacteriophage undergoes uncoating of their body. That means uncoating of a virus happens in penetration. Okay, after penetration, you can observe the bacterial nucleic acid is found inside the host cell. Then this nucleic acid of virus should take over the control of the host cell. To do that, they move to the third stage, that is biosynthesis. During the biosynthesis stage, as the first step, bacterial DNA or the host DNA is degenerated. Then the viral DNA or viral RNA can take over the control of the host cell. Then two main other events happen in the biosynthesis phase. Those are biosynthesis of viral DNA. That means the DNA or the nucleic acid of the virus is multiplied and produce thousands of copies inside the host cell. Next one is synthesis of proteins. Here proteins are synthesized in host cytoplasm using host resources. That means earlier we said ribosomes, amino acids, the energy, then enzymes for protein synthesis are taken from the host cell. When multiplying their nucleic acid also, nucleotides, energy, and some enzymes are taken from the host cell. But here, if a virus has RNA, first viral RNA should be converted into a DNA. We said viruses possess an enzyme called reverse transcriptase to convert RNA into DNA. Then the formed DNA involved in producing large number of copies of new RNA of virus. Okay, then after synthesizing large number of nucleic acids and capsomeres, they move to the fourth main step, that is maturation and assembly. Focus on the diagram. Here, as name implies, during maturation and assembly, DNA or the nucleic acid of virus and capsid proteins are assembled to form complete viral particles. This is called maturation. Here you can observe, as in the diagram, the phage assembly can happen in three basic steps. That means the head, the tail, and tail fibers can be separately arranged and finally form the bacteriophage. Okay, now after the fourth step, newly synthesized viral particles are found inside the host cell. Then they move to the final stage, that is release. During this release stage, bacteriophage induces bacterial cell to break open or lyse. Then they use enzymes to lyse the host cell. The newly produced bacteriophages are released from the host cell. Then those new released viruses can infect another host cell. So this is lytic cycle, because at the end of the life cycle, host cell is lysed. Here we can discuss lysogenic cycle. After penetration, viral DNA or RNA is found inside the host cell. So without lysing the host cell, this viral DNA is integrated into the bacterial DNA or bacterial chromosome. If the viral nucleic acid is RNA, first it should be reverse transcribed into DNA. Then that DNA, viral DNA, is incorporated into the host DNA. Then you can observe in this slide, it says after integrating into the bacterial DNA, it is now termed as prophage. So after this integration step, viral DNA is not identified by the host cell as a foreign particle. Therefore, it can easily escape. Okay, then as a part of the host DNA, viral DNA is also multiplied during the cell division. Then each daughter cell resulted by division get the viral DNA. Likewise, after several multiplications or several cell divisions, most of the host cells possess viral DNA as a part of the host chromosome or host DNA. Then, after a particular stage, you can observe here, such host cells with viral DNA can enter the lytic life cycle. Then, as we discussed earlier, the host cell will be lysed. So this lysogenic cycle is somewhat like an incubation period of some viruses. For an example, HIV also has a lysogenic period. During this lysogenic cycle, HIV move into many of the host cells. And after a particular incubation period, all those host cells enter the lytic cycle. So this is lysogenic. The next group of microorganisms is viroids. These are very simple structure. They consist of only a short piece of naked RNA. Actually, this is somewhat like a circular RNA. They do not possess any outer protective layer like a protein coat. These can multiply only within host cell using host cell resources. However, viroids do not contain any gene in their RNA and only carry signals for their multiplication. That means here this viroid RNA actually acts as a template of producing another RNA inside the host cell. Using the host enzymes, this RNA or viral RNA, viroid RNA act as a template and produce another copy of RNA. And using those RNA copies, so many new RNA copies can be synthesized. Those act as viroids and they are infectious. Then these viroids only infect plants. Remember that. Underline that in your note. The last group of microorganisms that we are discussing is prions. So what are these prions? Those are proteinaceous infectious particles. Simply, here these possess only a protein. Their size is smaller than viruses. Although prions lack nucleic acids, they can replicate with the help of the host gene that encodes a prion protein. So how it happens? Here, after infection, a prion protein can mutate the host gene. Then the mutated host gene produce prion proteins. But under normal conditions in a healthy person, that host gene can produce normal human proteins. But after infection, that particular gene code or provide genetic code to synthesize prion proteins. That's how they multiply inside the host cell. These are found as disease-causing agents in some birds and mammals. Remember those. All these diseases caused by prions are neurological diseases called transmissible spongiform encephalopathies, commonly known as TSEs. But in the exam, don't use the abbreviation TSE. Write the complete name, transmissible spongiform encephalopathies. Why this specific name is used? Because after infecting, they infect brain. After infecting, large vacuoles are developed inside the brain. So it gives a sponge-like appearance. You can observe in this diagram at your right-hand side. You can observe there are vacuoles or holes. It's somewhat like a sponge in the brain. There are two common diseases belong to this transmissible spongiform encephalopathies. Those are mad cow disease, which is a type of prion disease found in cows. The other one is one of the human diseases, that is Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. Here you can observe after forming or after having Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, as we said earlier, brain convert into a sponge-like structure. Okay. Then human-to-human transmission is associated with transfusion of infected blood and tissues or organ transplantation. Some TSEs may be transmitted from cow to human as well. Here we came to the end of the lesson. Remember to keep your resource book or the note when you are studying this video lesson. When you want to put a note on your resource book, you can simply pause the video and take your time to put that note. And as I told you, underline the important points in your resource book. It will be helpful in answering in structured essays and MCQs. And simply these stuff can be given in small essays as well as part of essays. For an example, lytic life cycle of a bacteriophage can be described or can be asked as a short note in essay and also as a part of the essay as well. Likewise, any other part can be given as short notes or simple short essays. So focus on lessons and try to memorize. Okay, hope to meet in next lesson under microbiology.